Last year, I passed a big birthday milestone, one of those that ends in 0. And there's another one coming up soon, actually on the feast day set aside in our church calendar to commemorate Mary and Martha. You can look that up later. It's in the front of the prayer book. Since I discovered that connection years ago, I've often thought how much I identify with the contrast between them and the questions it raises. For many women, myself included, and maybe for men too, the story of Mary and Martha lays open a dilemma. What is the right and proper way for me to offer to God the best service I have to give? Is it in making a home where family thrives and guests are welcome? Is it in working at a career that allows me to use my best gifts and skills outside my home? Or is it in tending before all else to matters of the soul? Each kind of service in itself can fill a lifetime. Can the same person undertake to balance them all? Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There's need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken from her. I've wondered for years now just how to take what Jesus said. It catches me in the gut every time as I try to work out my own understanding of the balancing act of doing what God would have me do. Does it catch you? My guess is that most of us, active, get-things-done Americans that we are, see ourselves mainly on Martha's side of the kitchen door. Yes? We've all been there, distracted by our many tasks and without enough time or help to get it all done. Now, we Southerners profess to know a lot about hospitality, about taking care of our guests, and I suspect that some of you are hip-deep in active hospitality right now. I certainly have been with 3 of my grandchildren here with me this past week. After all, it's the middle of July, and we do live in a great place to have or be a guest. But even we cannot hold a candle to the hospitality they practiced in the ancient world. That was very serious business. As last week's story of the Good Samaritan makes clear, traveling could be extremely dangerous. You didn't camp alone by the roadside, and staying at an inn wasn't much safer either. By far, the best thing travelers could do was to ask someone, even a total stranger, to stay at their home as guests, for the host assumed the role of protector as well as provider. To refuse hospitality to one who sought it was almost blasphemous, and travelers could generally expect to be welcomed, fed, sheltered, and treated with the utmost dignity the host could provide. We've all had the experience of having or being a house guest, but few of us, I suspect, have ever looked at the hospitality given or received as having anything to do with ministry. Jesus apparently did, though, for he told 70 disciples a little earlier in the Gospel of Luke, as he sent them out, when he sent them out, he told them to expect to find hospitality along the way, almost as payment for their evangelistic work. In today's story, Jesus himself is the visiting evangelist, journeying toward his destiny in Jerusalem. Luke doesn't name the village where the story takes place, nor does he let on that these 2 sisters are among Jesus' closest friends. Unlike John in the 4th Gospel, he never mentions their brother Lazarus or that Jesus raised him from the dead. From all Luke tells us, we could assume that Jesus had simply arrived in town and been offered a place to stay at Martha's home, exactly as he had told the 70 would happen to them. Once he accepted her invitation, whether she knew him well or not, it was Martha's job to treat her guest with all the courtesy in her power, and she took that responsibility seriously. Look who's coming to dinner. It's the man of God, indeed. It's the Lord himself. Her mind must have whirled as she ran over and over the list of tasks to be seen. So long and demanding was that list that she simply couldn't make herself stop whirling long enough to sit still and listen, much as she may have wanted to. Can't you just see her, wiping her hands on her flour-dusted apron, standing almost furtively behind the kitchen door, with her sleeves rolled up and a strand of hair falling over her face with its worried, unhappy expression? She strains to hear what Jesus says, but a pot starts to boil over, and she runs to take care of it, missing all but a few words here and there. Pressed from all angles to perform her duties, she is distracted from listening to Jesus' words of hope and strength. And when, in frustration, she finally steps into the room looking for help, she unfortunately directs it to the wrong person, to Jesus, not to Mary. And Jesus, who does not ever let himself get triangulated, rebukes her. It's gentle, even affectionate, but it still feels like a put down to hear that all her anxiety is unnecessary. And there sits Mary at the eye of the storm, earning Jesus approving words that she has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her. Now, right about here, the big sister blood in me starts to simmer hard as I fill my tanks with righteous indignation for poor, mistreated Martha. Little sister Mary suddenly becomes the enemy, the quiet rival. Is that a smirk hiding under her pious mask? She's stealing the Lord's approval from the one who works hard to live as an active disciple. And what's a woman doing trying to be a disciple anyway? But what is Jesus really telling Martha and us? Not that she should abandon her ministry of active hospitality, not that she should drag Mary from her attentive discipleship at his feet, not even that the sisters' approaches be seen as being in competition, opposing each other. He doesn't tell her that what she's doing isn't important. They both know it is. And he never suggests that Mary's way is easier. That's not its benefit. For breaking the mold, as she is doing, often leads to trouble. He reminds her of the one needful thing, the necessity of spending time listening for the voice of God, even in the midst of things that can cause trouble and anxiety. The prophet Micah sums it up in one sentence. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God? It's not either or, it's both and. Balance is critical here, and a sense of timing. Action on behalf of others, doing justice, loving kindness, is indeed true discipleship, and so is reflection, walking humbly with God. What is the point of study and contemplation like Mary's if no action is ever taken? And how can the outpouring of Martha-like energy in action be sustained without regular replenishment from listening to God in contemplation and prayer? It's a matter of knowing when. Jesus himself best shows us this balance and sense of timing. The Gospels are clear both about the strenuous activity of his ministry and about the frequency and regularity of his withdrawal from the fray to be alone with his Father in prayer. And Luke's placement of this story as a counterbalance to the Good Samaritan makes the point that active care and attentive prayer are equally important. These two stories, like these two sisters, are two sides of the same coin. Our own struggle for balance and timing reflects the tension between Mary and Martha, for Jesus has knocked at the door of our hearts, asking to be received and cared for as a guest. Luke doesn't finish this story any more than he finished the last one. We don't know whether the parable of the merciful Samaritan changed that lawyer who confronted Jesus and tried to trap him. Nor do we know how Martha responded to the Lord's gentle chiding. But both of these encounters are germane to you and me too, in the midst of our busy, distracted, and, dare I say it, sometimes somewhat self-important lives. So how will we respond? Go and do, or sit and listen? Which side of the scale needs attention for your life to find balance? Amen.